For this video series, I'm revisiting every episode of the 1993 animated series Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. This show was produced by DiC and was a surreal slapstick take on Sega's mascot and his world, which seemingly drew as much influence from the likes of Looney Tunes and Ren and Stimpy as it did the video games themselves. As a kid, I didn't really like this ridiculous version of the Hedgehog with attitude, but maybe now, all these years later, I'll find something in it that I didn't back then. So join me as I revisit every episode with an abridged retelling of the story, followed by a review and a ranking, as I put together my definitive list of the best to worst episodes of the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. Let's see how silly things get today as we dive into Episode 4, Slow Going. Our story begins at the weird treehouse of a family of cobweb-encrusted sloths. I guess to comedically establish right out of the gate just how slow these fuckers are. Enter Robotnik, Scratch and Grounder in the Egomatic, flying high above the house. Robotnik decides to use this family as bait to lure out Sonic, so he drops Scratch and Grounder out of the ship and they smash into a pile on the floor, taking part of the house with it. The plan here is to worry the sloths enough that they ask Sonic for help. It works, and one of the sloths uses a bizarre pulley system, some rope which eventually moves onto some phone lines to send a message to Sonic. Back at Robotnik's base, he explains his latest scheme to Scratch and Grounder. They are to go to Sloth City, which appears to be just this one treehouse with 5 sloths in it. Then they are to wait for Sonic and blast him with the slow motion ray Robotnik just invented. When this is done, they are to call Robotnik so he can come and pick the slowed down Sonic up and presumably lock him up or torture him or something. So Scratch picks up the ray and within seconds of getting his hands on it, he drops it on the floor and almost breaks it, then gets it stuck on his head somehow, before proceeding to bumble around the base, bumping into things and injuring himself in a scene reminiscent of the opening of the first Naked Gun movie. After this fannying about concludes, Robotnik explains that the ray is powered by a crystal that took him 9 years to develop, and that if they blast Sonic with it, he will slow down to the speed of a sloth for 1 hour. Scratch and Grounder then squabble over who gets the weapon, and obviously end up blasting Robotnik with it, who, sure enough, is slowed down for an hour. We then cut back to the sloth house / city, where I guess the main sloth is waiting for Sonic. And when he talks, he speaks frustratingly slowly in a joke that wears thin within seconds. Unfortunately, we have 17 more minutes of this episode to get through. Anyway, Sonic and Tails rock up and start making plans on how they can go about fixing the Scratch and Grounder damaged house, and they soon set to work while the sloths go back to bed. While Sonic and Tails are rebuilding the house, Scratch and Grounder show up and are spotted by the main sloth Rocket, who is on lookout for trouble with a massive gong. Using said gong, he alerts Sonic to their presence, who leaps into action as the badniks start blasting at the treehouse and the surrounding area with the slow-mo ray. Sonic quickly fortifies the house and then makes a run for it as Scratch and Grounder try to shoot him while bumbling around as usual. Oh, and there's a good line here, a good joke.
Stop complaining, it's my turn to be on top!
Well, at least turn off your treads!
Side note, it appears this ray also works on inanimate objects and liquids as they slow down a waterfall by mistake. Maybe this will come into play later. Or no, in this show, maybe not. Anyway, Robotnik then shows up to see how things are going and to give Scratch and Grounder a bollocking over their inability to blast Sonic. Unfortunately for him, the squabbling robots once again blast Robotnik with the slow-mo ray, so he leaves again, saying he will be back in an hour to try again. And I really like this silly joke of him having to keep going away for an hour while he recovers, by the way. Sometime later, accepting that Sonic is too fast to hit with the beam, Scratch comes up with a plan to slow him down using an inflatable school. The idea is that he will slow down around the school because, you know, safety first and all that. Not that Sonic is a car or whatever and that he doesn't have extremely fast reaction times. But whatever. Being a smart guy, Sonic sees through this for the bullshit that it is. I mean, it is visibly a bunch of inflatables after all. And he then whips up a tornado with his speed, which sucks up Scratch and Grounder, and then he picks up the wind with his hand and throws it?
What?
I guess that's something he can do. A new skill. So some time passes and Scratch and Grounder try something else. Grounder dresses up as a sloth and sits in a tree, and while Sonic is distracted trying to talk to him, because Sonic's all about sloths this week apparently, Scratch blasts him successfully with the Slow Ray. On Sonic's instructions, Tails races off to warn the sloths. Of what exactly, I'm not sure though. They were just bait for Sonic, so presumably they'll be left alone now. I don't know. So back at Sloth City, aka a single wooden structure in a tree housing a family of 5 sloths, Tails is trying to come up with a plan to help Sonic. Elsewhere, we see Sonic is being kept in a cage by Scratch and Grounder while they wait for Robotnik to come and, I guess, finish him off? They taunt him with food by snatching it away before he can get to it and throwing a cake at him. While they're carrying out this generally dickish behavior, Tails is able to sneak up on them with the Shrink Ray, but it gets knocked out of his hands and the crystal inside breaks. The one that took Robotnik 9 years to develop. Information I'm not sure we needed to know, but it was mentioned earlier. So Slow-Mo Sonic distracts Scratch and Grounder and Tails escapes with the now broken Slow-Mo Ray and heads back to the sloths. Luckily, it turns out that when the crystal in the ray broke, it turned from a Slow-Mo Ray into a Fast-Mo Ray. So the sloths are zapped with the ray, given super speed, and then they all race off to help Sonic. Back at the cave, the sloths attack Scratch and Grounder and distract them, while Tails zaps Sonic and brings him back up to his normal super speed. With his speed back, Sonic beats the shit out of Scratch and Grounder and slingshots them into the distance, far from the cave. Robotnik then shows up demanding Tails hand his ray gun back. Tails blasts him with it, perhaps a silly move as super speed has been nothing but an advantage to everyone else in this episode, but luckily in this circumstance it makes Robotnik's Egomatic go nuts and he shoots off at great speed with no control of the ship. Roll credits! This wasn't a bad episode overall. It was a fairly grounded story with nothing too weird going on by this show's standards. A very simple premise, but entertaining. This one got a few genuine laughs out of me too. For example, a scene where Sonic is throwing notes at Tails to take down, only for him to reveal after a while of writing that he's just been scribbling indecipherable gibberish, as he is only 4.5 years old in this show, and he cannot write. The sloth characters were fine, I guess. I always appreciate it when the episodes use actual animals for the supporting characters rather than weird aliens and sausage people and shit. But the joke of Rocket speaking incredibly slowly grew stale within seconds, but continued throughout more or less the entire episode. Visually, I thought this one was pretty well animated and the backgrounds were fairly normal and a lot less vomit-inducing than some of the more wild ones that sometimes show up in this series. Overall, a decent, grounded episode, even if it did feel like a bit of a filler one. Not a huge amount to say about it as a result. Ranking. So where does it go on my ranking? I'm going to place it in the 3rd spot, behind the first 2 episodes, as I felt they had stronger stories, but ahead of Lovesick Sonic, as that episode featured quite an obnoxious character in the form of Breezy, and a whole lot of weird shit. This 4th one was a bit light on plot, but generally inoffensive. But what do you think? Do you agree with my thoughts, or do I sound like a madman? Let me know your thoughts on the episode in the comments below. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button. And if you're new here, check out the previous episodes and some of my other videos, as I'd love to see you here more often. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.